Good morning, members of the Committee of Cvromi, other members of Parliament, present, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those following via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this Committee of Cvromi for today, Wednesday, August 13th, 2025. I would like to give a special welcome to the representatives of Crowley. We have established a quorum of 4 factions. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received a notice of absence from the following committee members: MP Sarah Westcott-Williams, and I received a notice of lateness from MP Doran and MP De Weaver. Are there any notifications? I see that MP La Cruz.
A blessed morning, Mr. Chairman. Notification, MP Otley is also a few minutes late. He's on his way. And thank you for finally organizing this meeting that was requested some time back. Thank you, Mr. Cruz, for coming and giving this presentation to Parliament. Those in the Tribune, a blessed morning. My fellow colleagues, time to bring Sint Maarten back on the map. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I see that there are no other notifications. So we'll be moving on to the agenda point. The agenda point of this meeting goes as follows: presentation on a proposed development of Transshipment Port in Sint Maarten, IS 147 2022-2023, dated October 27th, 2023, and IS 1047 2023-2024, dated September 5th, 2024. We go over to the agenda point. On September 5th, 2024, Parliament received a letter from Crowley with a request for an audience with the Parliament of Sint Maarten. Crowley, represented by the Director of Business Development, Arturo Cruz, has submitted a proposal expressing interest in developing a utility-scale liquefied gas, natural gas, LNG, power plant along with a transshipment point in Sint Maarten. The company has previously engaged with Parliament in various meetings, first in 2021 and again in 2022, in a virtual meeting with GEBE. The proposal highlights several anticipated benefits, including the introduction of LNG as a clean energy source, the development of a transshipment port to support regional trade and the cruise industry, and the potential for job creation, investment attraction, and overall economic growth. The company has expressed its strong interest in furthering the discussion and sharing details and requirements for the project, hence this meeting. Before I give the floor to the representative of Crowley, and in order to increase interaction on the topic in this committee setting, I would like to suggest each committee member pose a couple of questions, 2-3 questions initially, to where Mr. Cruz can give a direct answer and we could have some interaction. And in another moment, after everyone has a chance to pose their questions, everyone will be able to answer and pose their remaining questions. I see there's no questions on that. So moving forward, I will now give the floor to the representative of Crowley, Mr. Cruz, for an initial presentation. Mr. Arturo Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking... Should I just leave it?
Good. Yeah.
There you go. Well, as I was saying, thank you very much. I'd like to get started by thanking everybody in this room for your interest and attention to our requests. I also would like to obviously thank the company I represent for supporting throughout these years the initiative that we started back in 2021. So transshipment, in the sense of this conversation, I'd like to define it as an activity that will help distribute a product within the country and to the vicinity of the country. Why? Because in this environment, the volumes of the product, in this case natural gas, and the distance to the consumers is of extreme importance. For years, the region has tried approaches to diversify its fuel matrix. What we have found is that the scale is very important, therefore bringing, for example, an LNG carrier, which is of a huge nature, does not have enough, wouldn't have enough consumption for a single point. So transshipment brings the value in terms of enabling further consumption in one point, and also bringing resilience to the first off-taker close to that transshipment point. So that's the context that I want to talk about within this follow-up presentation. And of course, by all means, this has to be a conversation. If you have pressing questions, just ask me, and then we can stop and we can talk about it. So I do have an agenda here. I like to talk a little bit, for those who are not that familiar with the company I represent. I'll give you a very quick update. Then we'll talk a little bit about natural gas. I have to say that in this conversation, we don't want to say that this is good and the other one is bad. We want to bring the advantages. We want to highlight the advantages. We want to highlight what the world is doing about it. And we also want to be aware of challenges that the environment presents to the incumbents of the proposal. Okay, so by all means, this is not a magic bullet. This is not the one solution, and this is not to talk about ill of any other fuel supply. This is to create a conversation that, at the end of the day, adds value to everybody in the community and everybody doing business within. As a third topic, I have the LNG economy. We get into how do we get to a transshipment situation that brings that full potential of the supply of the molecule. And then, of course, maybe part of the same topic is what suggestions we have to get going, what experiences we have found along the way. Definitely, it is, in my opinion, a simple concept with very complex, much complexities within. So the concept at the end of the day is simple, but the execution brings certain complexities that having a team approach is, a transparent team approach is the best way to address them. Okay. So having said that, I'm going to start with a brief update on what Crowley is. We are a U.S. privately owned corporation. It's owned by the Crowley family, third generation. Family, Mr. Crowley, the founder, started about 130 years ago with Crowley, and nowadays continues to be private and in excess of $3 billion of revenue. We are an important government contractor. We have important industrial customers in many spaces, which I will show you. And we serve several nations around the world, heavily focused in the Americas, particularly the U.S., the Caribbean, and Central America, where we have a very important presence. But nonetheless, we also have presence in other regions of the world. And maybe we'll have the chance to talk a little bit about it. The company, as any corporation, responsible corporation, has a vision and safety and environmental assurances that we want to share with you. Being accountable is also one of them, and obviously safety, for example, being part of one of these grow responsibly, for example, is of utmost importance for all the members of our corporation. Crowley nowadays is made of 5 business units. The one that I represent is the shipping business unit. The subgroup that I represent is called Crowley Advanced Energy. And within Crowley Advanced Energy, we have the expertise for Crowley. We call it Crowley LNG, and we also call it Crowley Microgrids. And we can talk about the definition of a microgrid but we'll get to that if necessary. Now, on the far right, you will see that there is a business unit dedicated to fuels. It is not natural gas. We decided to put natural gas on the shipping business because of, corporate structure, priorities, different ways of interacting in these business units. But rest assured that Crowley has a vast experience in transporting and promoting fuels, all type of fuels. So this to highlight that we're not against, or we're not saying that this fuel is bad and this one is better. We're just serving the needs of a community. At the end of the day, it all started as a transportation company, and if you look at it, even if it's a huge vessel or a small vessel, it's still transportation. If it's a truck, it's transportation, and therefore that's what the business has grown upon. Bringing products from point A to point B, and therefore you see a logistics business unit. On the energy sector, you see at the center we have the wind services, the offshore wind services. We don't produce the power, but we serve the power producers. Like in the northeast of the U.S., we have the maritime assets to serve the rigs, the wind farms, the energy industry that has been in the newspapers recently, but nonetheless, it's one way of addressing the energy concern that the community has with renewable energy. So a mix of energy sources. We're not saying, again, that this one is good and the other one is bad. Talking a little bit more specifically about the shipping business unit, we have taken delivery this year of 4 dual fuel powered vessels. The propulsion is now liquid fuel, marine gas oil, and LNG. So those are 4 vessels that add to an already 2 vessels that have been operating for some few years. So that shows, in our opinion, the commitment that the company has also to transitioning into these alternative fuels. Which, by the way, alternative means, we know that LNG is still a hydrocarbon, and we'll talk more about it. But we see it as a transition, an economy of transition to get to one point, get to 100% zero emissions, zero pollutants. But we deal with what we have at hand, and it certainly has helped the interests of our customers and the communities that we serve, as well as the company. We also have escort services, ship assist. I'm not going to get into the details. Of course, the presentation is yours. You have it in your system. We have global ship management. That's where I meant when we said we serve more than 36 nations. We operate vessels that are not are not Crowley property, but we operate them nonetheless. And as such, we have customers around the world, and we help them move their products with the expertise in terms of maritime knowledge. Offshore and project management. Engineering services. In this capability, of course, for what we are talking about today, 2 topics are of extreme importance. Naval engineering, the design of a vessel, efficiency, and cryogenics. LNG, liquefied natural gas, is a very cold liquid. That's the one way of increasing the density of energy per unit of volume. So cryogenics is of utmost importance in this topic. And now I want to get now what we do in distribution and the LNG space. So what we do, what we started, or this business unit started about 14 years ago, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, is that we moved LNG from Jacksonville, Florida, to Puerto Rico. We put them on our own vessels that are dual fuel as well, nowadays are dual fuel, and we ship the containers to Puerto Rico. And we started to see an interest from the industrial base to receive more of the LNG, convert it into natural gas, and then process it, and then utilize what it's called as CHP, combined heat and power. Combining heat and power is important because you have the ability to produce electricity, and you also have the ability to generate, for example, hot water or steam, while only burning the fuel in a single engine or turbine. So this term CHP perhaps is going to pop up in this conversation more than once. That's what it is. And the Puerto Rican market started to adopt that fuel as a viable option in terms of its characteristics. As you can see in the pictures, for example, the containers, 40-foot containers, cryogenic in its nature, it's not a simple cylinder. It's a cylinder within a cylinder to maintain temperatures. I should say that the cryogenic nature of this liquid brings certain complexities to its how you treat it, how you handle it. So we can talk a little bit more about it. But it's not a simple cylinder. It is more technology within. Okay. Now, important to notice is, for example, the picture top right for you is you can see at the back a storage tank. That one is a huge storage tank. It's about 42 million gallons that nowadays gets refilled, I would say, once a month, give or take, once every 2 months, but, very frequently. It's brought by an LNG carrier. We'll talk about the LNG carrier in a second. But important to notice is that there are two power plants, one to the right and one to the left. And these are big, big power plants. And that's the way when we started bringing it the way we started from Jacksonville in these containers, and this other power plant was starting to use natural gas, we said, hey, there's an opportunity to do somewhat of a transshipment, a local transshipment, because now we take from that big storage tank and then we redistribute it to the industry. So we have the anchor customers that are the big power plants, and then we have the CHP facilities around the island that take that gas. The advantage of this business model is that the cost of getting the molecule has been reduced dramatically, because now you're getting the gas in bulk, in huge volumes. And that helps us control better the cost and the price that we offer to the customers. One more thing. When we talk about, we can talk about price, we can talk about cost, but we should also talk about value. In my experience, those two things may not always be the same. Yeah, we want to have the lower cost of the molecule. We want to have the lower cost of food. We want to have but there are other intangibles that we value the most. In a political environment, I remember, getting ready to fly to a country in the Caribbean, and then the government had announced the elimination of a subsidy to the fuels. And of course, it created a social unrest. And therefore, you can see that the value there, that the actions taken were more on the value that this action brought to the community than on the cost itself. And this is an example. The other way example applies. Communities are not happy with what they have. They may feel that the cost is higher, but the overall benefit of the solution, outweighs the monetary cost. So value is an important concept that we should always have in mind. Well, so that picture is what it's doing right now. It created a value to the industrials for having a molecule that is now, it needs to be delivered to the country anyways because of those two power plants. And you'll understand this comment when we get into the next slides. And the way to distribute it, again, Transshipment Point in Puerto Rico. We have that vessel that you can see in the lower right, and we send it to other Caribbean islands. So that's a transshipment opportunity, in other words. Now, the closer you are to your final destination, the better it is for the final cost of the solution, okay? Another activity that we have in the same Crowley LNG is we are operating a vessel, the one, top right, it's called the Progress. It's a 12,000 cubic meter vessel, and it supplies LNG to other larger vessels. I mean, clearly in the picture, I mean, it's shown over there. That's what we do. That vessel operates out of Savannah, Georgia waters, and it's been a success because, and this is also important for our conversation, because this vessel is high technology, so it's highly efficient. And while the cost of building one of these vessels in the US is extremely high, the total cost of ownership at the end of the day is lower than a conventional vessel. We'll talk about it also in this in the final slides. I mean, what trade-offs we have to make in order to get to the overall value of the solution proposed. In this picture, as I said, we have nowadays 6 vessels that run on LNG. At the center, you can see our station where we refuel the vessels in Jacksonville. It is 2,000 cubic meters. It looks small, and it also shows you, compared to the other picture that I showed you at in the other slide, a huge tank. These are a lot smaller bullets, we call them, that fulfill a purpose. So at the end of the day, the whole solution doesn't have to, it's not that we're gonna fit a size to what we try to do. We want to understand what needs to be done here to make it efficient, cost-effective, and then take it from there. So the understanding the problem, and everybody gets the chance to describe the problem when we are forming the solution, is what matters at the beginning. So the technical approach to the problem is of utmost importance, I have to say. Okay. And just recently, not sure if you are familiar, but the U.S. has this Jones Act cabotage law, basically, that requires a vessel to be crewed by American citizens. Most of the times has to be built in the U.S. I mean, there's something going on right now with the current administration that, vessels need to be built to carry LNG. They need to be built in the U.S. Crowley was able to find the way to acquire a vessel, French-built, and reflag it for that purpose. So as of May of this year, we have the one and only U.S. LNG carrier in the world is owned by Crowley, and we're serving the route, the Gulf of America now, to Puerto Rico. So the U.S. The gas produced in the U.S. is now delivered to Puerto Rico. And it's an advantage now that we have this, because it also shows how viable it is to work with U.S. gas. In other words, there's plenty of it. There are more terminals, export terminals coming online, approved. We expect, when we talk about price, if we have the opportunity or in the indices, we'll talk about Henry Hub compared to other indices around the world. Very favorable terms in terms of the future of LNG for the region and for the world, by the way. And very important to this process to get to reaching transshipment capacity, port electrification. Of course, you know better than I. Although I lived in Puerto Rico, but being in an island, the port is so important, and the industry, the tendency is to, when the vessel gets at port, have the capability of stopping the engines and taking cleaner power, whether it is produced by renewable energy or a cleaner fuel, but now they use the port energy while they are at dock, at berth. And with that, that brings the benefit. And cruise liners, shipping companies are looking for this solution. It's something that their carbon intensity index, which is also a IMO mandate, has to go down. So ports nowadays represent an important piece of the puzzle for the maritime industry. Okay, so that's important. And we, I mean, of course, as you can see, we are developing this. This picture is of the San Diego port. We have it over there, and we are, as we speak, building a similar one in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Okay, so that's about Crowley. That's what we are doing. I mean, I trust I could convey the message that, you know, the company knows what it's doing in this natural gas space. Now, let's talk a little bit about natural gas, because it is important to go to the basics, in my opinion. The picture in the image just shows you several of the elements of the supply chain. We'll talk about it later, but yeah, it's an introduction to that topic. So, natural gas, naturally formed in the, you know, in the world, in our universe, if you will, and the chemical formula is CH4. One atom of carbon and 4 of hydrogen. As simple as that, okay? Now, the question is, if we didn't do any oil exploration, any gas exploration, would we have methane? The answer is yes. Methane, CH4, is generated by human activity. Landfill, not sure if it happens here, but in other parts of the world, landfills experience fires sometimes, you know, old landfills. And everybody goes like, why did the landfill just, I mean, it rained. Why did the landfill caught fire? It's because of the methane. You know, the gas that is produced by all the organic waste. Farms, animal farms, they create methane. So there's a whole industry around bio-LNG that is created. So it's not necessarily, the answer is not that when we stop drilling, we will stop getting methane. No, methane will be with us as long as we are a human race. So that's important. It sounds a very simple concept, but it is what it is. It is a reality. Now, why is important this chemical formula? Well, we have always been burning hydrogen. Everybody talks about hydrogen, and hydrogen is the destination, if you ask me, or one of the destinations. There's no carbon. When there's combustion or oxidation, there's no carbon dioxide. I mean, there's no byproduct from hydrogen other than water. And that's perfect. So the intention of this slide is to just show you that one of the simplest molecules there are is, or formulas, is the methane formula, because it only has one carbon molecule, as opposed to other fuels that carry more carbon. So when they oxidize, the release of CO2, for example, is higher. And that's one of the basic assumptions that we are making around the world is, while we transition to 100% zero emissions, one molecule, when it oxidizes, is better than 3 molecules when they oxidize, or 12 molecules when they oxidize. So that's the takeaway of this slide, that methane by itself represent a small, or the smallest amount of, you know, oxidation emission to the environment. Yes, ammonia is there, and ammonia doesn't have any carbon, so it is really clean. However, even hydrogen, I mean, LPG, you know, all the fuels have presented at some point the risks innate to their nature. And for sure, the world decided to choose what we use today. There's nothing wrong with that. Natural gas, on the other hand, has been made more available around the world, and the infrastructure gradually is growing. And one day, it's gonna reach the point where the fuels of today have been experiencing all along. So the infrastructure is already amortized. The technology is there. Definitely safety is there for now for natural gas, and I'll get to it in the next slide. So this is the comparison I wanted to make with natural gas. And again, I'm not saying that the other fuels are bad. It's just they are different composition. and that has some intrinsic complexities. Now, for example, if you look at the chart on the left, we talk about energy density. And while some, some fuels have more energy density, you can see gasoline or, diesel, right, pretty much at the diesel fuel with the green bar, the energy density that you carry, let's say on a unit per volume, others have less. So those are topics that we have to consider. One of the reasons of liquefying the natural gas, as I said, is to carry the most amount of energy per unit of volume. So just as an example, if we wanted to bring, this cup full of gas, of natural gas in its gaseous status, and we would be carrying, let's say, 1. If we liquefy it, we carry 600 times the amount of energy in this very same cup. So that's the point of liquefying it, increasing the energy density per unit of volume. So by the time you receive it, the cost of delivered energy is dollars per unit of energy. It's going to be lower. So you want to pack as much energy as possible in that volume in your transportation. Okay. Now, in terms of flammability, for example, it's also an important thing. You can see that there are some elements that are more flammable and therefore present more safety risks. I mean, not that they cannot be controlled, they need infrastructure to be controlled. I mean, and they are controlled as we speak. But natural gas has this ability that, first of all, it's very cold. If we have a spill, it just, as soon as it touches the environment, it evaporates. So there's no really contamination. It is toxic, and in a room, you don't want to be in a room where you have a natural gas leak, but it evaporates. The other important characteristics of natural gas is that you really need a very specific and small proportion of air to fuel ratio mix in order to be able to ignite. So that is also a good, the world has just turned into natural gas for several reasons, not only because of the cost, but also for safety measures and the ability to handle that kind of liquid in the cryogenics. That's the person. So you have also heard about methane slip. Yes, we have. I mean, methane is one of the greenhouse gases, but it is one of them, not the only one. And I have to tell you that there is a concern. It is voiced, in all the conferences, in all the groups that we are part of. It is a concern, and we address the participants of the industry in terms of what are you doing to reduce this methane slip. And the answer is that they are doing it. I mean, it's an ongoing process, and it gradually, as you can see here on the chart of the right, it depends on the technology that you find the methane slip portion of the combustion, and it is simply unburned methane. Methane slip is unburned methane in the combustion chamber, whether it is a burner, an engine, or a turbine. I mean, when it doesn't burn completely, the methane escapes. But there are technologies to capture as much of it, and as I said, I mean, we continue to press the industry to provide better solutions in terms to reducing the methane slip. So yes, we are aware of it. I mean, we don't want to just say, no, well, don't talk about it. No, let's talk about it. I mean, it is there. But there are ways to deal with it, okay? Okay. And again, on the left-hand side, yes, methane slip. It's, people say, well, it's bad. Yes, it is bad, but it is one of the greenhouse gases. It's not the only one, and we have to be aware of that before we just think that, no, if it's methane, it's the reason of the whole greenhouse gas situation. No, it is not. Okay, hydrogen. Let's talk about hydrogen, because also, I go to meetings, I go to communities, and they say, well, why don't we just go to hydrogen? Yeah, I mean, why not? But what happens is that, for example, the Port of Rotterdam announced I was at a conference earlier this year in Amsterdam, and the Port of Rotterdam said, yeah, we're creating this hydrogen corridor. So we're moving into that path. And that's great. The one characteristic that they have included in their business model is that there are considerable off-takers for hydrogen. And granted, power generation is not, I would say, is not the one and only off-taker. Hydrogen is part of many industrial processes, and that's why when we talk about hydrogen and why don't we do this with hydrogen, we need to consider who's going to use the hydrogen. And because it's not cheap nowadays, or it is of significant cost just to bring hydrogen from afar to burn it into an engine or a generator. There has to be a volume, a demand, and industrialized countries have those infrastructures or those demands available to burn that hydrogen. And there are some government incentives, fiscal incentives, all sorts of incentives that make the hydrogen corridor viable. So I hope that one day we can be talking here about hydrogen. Crowley definitely is invested in hydrogen as well. We're part of some startups. We're testing hydrogen in some shipping developments as well. But we see that one of the reasons why we have taken the delivery of LNG dual fuel powered vessels is because we see it as a viable solution that gradually is taking presence in the Caribbean and Central America. So again, yes, let's talk about hydrogen, let's talk about other fuels. We don't want just to hide from those. We want to be open to the fact that we know about them, and we still support the idea that the transition to that zero emissions economy is through, one of them could LNG, and there are others. And companies have the right, communities have the right to choose their own way or their path to get to that zero emissions day. Okay, now talking about the LNG economy, and not different from many other fuel supplies, but in reality, as you can see in the picture, we have several elements. And basically, you can say that you have upstream, midstream, and downstream. Upstream, where it is produced, the cost associated to producing it. Midstream, you can say the liquefaction at the export terminal, and then the transportation on the vessel, and maybe even the delivery, depending on the volume. And I would say in the next slide that that midstream starts at the import terminal, and then it ends at the at last mile as a downstream operation. Okay, but those are the components, and when we look at it, we need to have in mind everything that happens from where it is produced, whether it is a gray, blue, or green molecule, until the point where we put it in our generators and we use it. Okay. So, for this proposal, what we considered is that the midstream and downstream start to happen in Sint Maarten. The rest of it, the upstream, happens overseas, and it depends where the molecule comes, the LNG comes. We're going to keep that as upstream. The cost of the upstream are part of the delivered cost of energy. But the important thing is that while in Sint Maarten, now we start to considering, okay, what elements of storage do I want to have? Do I need to have? Have I looked at the whole problem? Do I need an onshore storage tank? Do I need a floating storage tank? Do I need a jetty? Do I need a pier? Do I need a truck loading facility? All those elements happen at the midstream level, and also they cascade down to the final, I'm going to say final destination, as you can see in number 7, which is transshipment and bunkering. And transshipment, like I said, it brings the benefit to the one holding the tank, for the lack of a better term, owning the tank, having it by my users, and that has the benefit. But it will indeed help the communities nearby. As I said at the beginning, in the past, we tried to bring a huge LNG carrier to an island. The volume is not there. The cost is too much. So what the world is doing is that the size of there is a term now, small-scale LNG carrier. And it could be from, actually, the first one in the US was 2,000 cubic meters. China is full of barges with, 1,000 cubic meter tanks. Now we have 6,000. Crowley, actually, we are working on some developments with 6,000 cubic meters, started from 7. We have the 12,000. There are 18,000. So the small scale, I would say, stops at 30,000 cubic meters. So we can shuttle nowadays up to 30,000 cubic meters, and we still call it small scale, which is probably what we need in the region. I mean, what is the electrical load here in the island? 60, maybe 100. So you cannot bring a huge LNG carrier. It will sit here, the boil off. There's a nature of the gas because it's liquid. It's a cryogenic. It's, the nature just tends to boil it, right? So that gas, now you have to do something with it. So there's a cost associated to either cooling it down, bringing it as liquid again, or burning it into the ship's engines or the power plant's engines. So all those costs we need to account for. And the good thing is that now the infrastructure is available, readily available, to talk about small scale, which 10 years ago we didn't have. Now, if you ask me how many vessels there are around the world for small scale, there are not that many. Order book for huge container ships, cargo vessels, car carriers are surpass the 600. I mean, depends how you count, but significant number of vessels are being built that will take natural gas. Not so many in terms of bunkering, smaller sizes. So it is also a matter of understanding that there has to be a vision and there has to be the steps taken in order to get to the right size of the solution. Okay? So the Eastern Caribbean requires a specific size. We all know about that, and we're getting to that point. The technology is there, and the cost, the volumes, the availability of the supply. As I said, by 2028, we should have a worldwide very good supply of LNG, for everybody to consume. So that's a good thing. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. Not sure if this is going to happen, this or that. But what we see, what the experts say, and by all means, I'm not an expert. I'm just trying to convey a message here. This is what we are seeing. So the proposal is this. For Sint Maarten, we think that if you start with the power plant, with GEBE, and we have spoken to GEBE about this, okay? They understand the concept. Of course, cost is important, and we're not going to deny that. There needs to be focus on the cost. But again, as I said, what's the value that you find in this? And so the power plant is important. So once we understand the technical problem, it's not a problem, the technical challenge with GEBE, and we provide a technical solution. That's why the blue bar here is the largest. Then we say, okay, now we include the industrial base. The industrial base are microgrids, is the port. The port, as I said, is very important. If the port joins the wagon, then now we have a consumer and an element that when it's not delivering power to the ship, then it is delivering power to the grid, okay? So it gives it the ability. Now, the power plant, an old power plant used to be, these are the engines, and let's just burn fuel. No, nowadays a power plant is really a microgrid. It could be distributed power. You don't have to have all the engines at one place. You can have, different generating points connected to a transmission line. You have to have the ability to evacuate that power. So the concept of a new power plant is not just a single piece of land. It could be several points of generation that produce the power. And for that, we need to design the concept because it would be beneficial for everybody. I mean, voltage regulation, frequency regulation, all those things. I mean, when you have one single provider, those who are, in technical terms, you have to have engines running. It's called the spinning reserve. to reserve to react to system frequencies variations or voltage variations. So you're burning fuel here that you probably wouldn't be if you had a different configuration of your system. So that's one thing that, in my opinion, in our opinion, and where we have done it in other places, is we have a real conversation with the utility. And again, I'm happy to say that we have started that conversation, and GEBE seemed very open to the topic. So where the power plant becomes the anchor customer and drives the rest of the solution. So we go to the industrials, CHP, again, the hotels, whatever manufacturing we have here, we can produce, we can give them, the CHP solution gives them a thermal load. The water for this, I mean, I don't think we need hot water for the swimming pool here, but let's say for the laundry, for the showers, for everything. So it comes as a gift, if you will, for this kind of application. And there are plenty of companies, I'm not saying that Crowley is going to do everything. Oh, no, we're just enabling because of what we know how to do. And yes, we do have a business unit that does microgrid, but it doesn't have to be us. I mean, we don't want to come here and say, oh, this is all of us. No, what makes sense to bring to the table? Who is better qualified to bring this and that to the table? And that's how you manage risk, okay? Who's in a better position? And then you get to transshipment. That's the point. I put it pink because I think that's an ideal place to be, where you have the ability to do transshipment. Now you have other power plants. You have St. Kitts. You have even the French side, right? I mean, you have the ability to ship gas over there. You have, all the way down to Curaçao. It is getting to that point that really brings the benefit first to the community who starts with it, and then it cascades down to the rest of the region, if you will. Okay. Finally, bunkering, ship bunkering. That's what I meant by bunkering. Cruise liners, I mean, they are big, they are coming. I am in constant conversation, well, we are in constant conversations with the cruise lines. I hope that you can read some announcement in the press, world press, before the end of the year that, Crowley is involved in these developments. We're aiming for that. Container vessels. I don't want to get into very, very, very technical. However, bunkering is a market that normally do not buy on long-term contracts, as opposed to a power plant, where certainty of the fuel price is desired. We're gonna, we have a supply of let's say 10 years or 5 years, whatever. Okay, that helps control the I guess the base price. But a bunker operation for a ship, the way they operate is on the spot market. Now, spot market is an attractive market because the margins are better because it's on a need basis. But again, the combination of those elements is what makes a full business model viable. So those are the steps of the business model. Again, power plant is, the concept is simple, just as you saw on the picture that I showed of Puerto Rico. Huge tank. And then we said, yeah, we already have the tank. Let's just send it to the industry. So it was a benefit, an additional benefit. But we had to start from the power plant. Now, I'm not saying that the only way of doing it is the power plant, but it is, in our experience, the way the majority has started to do it. Also, we are seeing in the region that the storage tank for transshipment is starting to gain some traction. So it's only a matter of time when we have closer source of LNG, perhaps. So again, it is, what is the objective that we want to accomplish here? And we need to design for it, okay? And we need to, I guess in any design phase, you leave some space for growth, for sure. But you just don't want to build something that is huge and then it's a huge white elephant that didn't serve anybody. So we want to work with you on that regard. Technology-wise, again, efficiency is very important. You can tell me, well, the cost of the cost of fuel that we have now is this. Okay, that's the cost of fuel. But what about efficiency? What about your power system efficiency? I mean, if you work with your efficiency, if you make it efficient, then I can probably tell you that you're going to see a better, a reasonable business performer. You know, your financials are going to look better. It's not instantaneous because investments have to be made. Who's going to make the investments? You know, all those questions we need to answer. But I think that we are having here this conversation is important because you are so important to enabling the next conversations with particular players or pieces of the puzzle. Without your support, then we go back like, what if we cannot do it? What if the license is not there? So this conversation is of extreme importance to all the parties involved. And, you know, a little bit on the same concept, but on a process kind of approach, is that FSU is not Florida State University, I have to say. FSU is Floating Storage Unit, okay? And, but let's say it's not floating, it's onshore. It depends on the real estate that we have available, right? Sometimes it makes more sense to be on the water. Sometimes it makes more sense to be onshore. Costs are definitely different, but it doesn't say that one is higher than the other. It depends. It very much depends on many factors. Then we have an import terminal. That import terminal, again, could be on the water, could be onshore. It has the ability to load trucks, for example, and then it goes to the power plant. We have some projects that, again, CHP is a power plant. It goes on a truck. Other projects, it goes on a duct, in a pipeline. So again, what do we want to do it here? How do we do it here, okay? Then you get to the shore power kind of application. That's for the ships, for the cruise lines, for the cargo vessels. Again, remember, carbon intensity index for the vessels, according to IMO, is of extreme importance, and there are penalties assigned to ship owners if they don't comply. So it is in their best interest to take power to turn off their engines, their marine gas oil engines, and take, I'm gonna say, cleaner electricity, okay? Then, as I said, the hotels, combined heat and power. Then you get to transshipment, and then you do the bunkering. Those are the steps that we want to propose that you consider in this conversation. There is, at the center stage, you're going to see manage, take, or pay risk. In the industry, there is a term take or pay, which means, I mean, you sign for X amount of gallons per day, per year, per term, and you have to pay. Why? Because there's lots of investments that have to be made in the back to make this fuel available to you, or this product available to you. I mean, we can talk in general terms. So take or pay is an important concept. Some of them like very high take or pay percentages, others are more reasonable. If we diversify the consumption matrix, the risk of take or pay is managed better. Let's say that the utility had an outage. They didn't take any gas that week, that month, maybe. Well, there are some other industrial customers in the island and in other islands that can make for that volume consumption. So that's the advantage of being a first mover in the kind of transshipment objective. Because anybody who's at the end of the line, of course, is going to get a better price, but it's going to get a little bit different terms depending on the distance and depending on the volume. Okay. Now, we want to have a shuttle vessel, perhaps, that has several stops before coming back to reload. The advantage of it is that all these customers share the cost of transportation. So it's not one round trip from here, let's say, to another adjacent island and back, and this customer, point B, pays for the whole round trip. No, if we have several stops in this one round trip, then everybody dilutes the cost of the transportation. So that's, again, reduces the cost of delivered energy. And again, I mean, of course, I want to talk about environmental, dealing with the environmental. I think it's an important aspect in many communities your constituents may have. And yes, I agree, and we acknowledge that cost is of importance, the rate of electricity that is paid here. Everybody wants to have a better rate of electricity. I want to have a better rate of electricity at my house. We have to be aware that it's not instantaneous, and we don't want to make that promise that, all of a sudden everybody's going to pay half of the rate. No, it's a transition to get there, and it's just the way it is. But again, we want to be as transparent as possible, but we want to continue to work on this conversation that, as you said, Mr. Chairman, we started several years ago already. Okay. With that, I'm going to stop right here. Maybe you have some questions. We can have that conversation if you want. So, well, if I may, transshipment would benefit, in my opinion, all this, the region, one way or the other. And that's, again, it's part of the proposal, right? These are some designs. I mean, this is just, that's a design. But again, it's possible, it's doable. If the port, we're going to do transshipment, but the next port doesn't have cranes, well, we put them on the vessel. Again, it's a matter of finding a way of doing it and removing the obstacles that we find in the way. This conversation, as you know, has happened. We've been talking about LNG as a minimum, I'm going to say 15 years, minimum. LNG has been available in the world, I guess commercially available since the 1970s. So, we have had this conversation. It takes time to get to contracts, that we know it. But the first, what's the saying? A 1,000-mile walk starts with the first step. So, and I think this is not the first step. We have taken already several steps here, amongst us. So that's one thing. This is another design. Again, hopefully we can make an announcement soon enough about a similar vessel that you are seeing in the screen, making it reality, serving some communities. So again, on the transportation aspect and on the gas to power aspect, we understand what needs to be done in general terms. We need to focus on the details, say, okay, GEB, let's talk about this. Would you like to start with the one engine? Would you like to do the whole thing? Would you like to do it here? Would you like to do it distributed? Those conversations need to happen, and your support for that is very important, okay? No different than any other places, but I have to say that it is a very special opportunity, a very special place, because you have opened the doors to this conversation. In other places, we just get the no, and we'll see what happens. We'll wait until hydrogen is available. And, well, okay. No comment about it. It's just the way it is. So thank you very much. Now, I'm ready. Here are references for what we talked. And if you're ready, I'm ready to take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz, for your presentation. To whom may I give the floor? I see that MP Peterson would like to have the floor. MP Peterson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A good morning to yourself, to the griffier, to my honorable colleagues, to Mr. Cruz for joining us, and to his colleagues as well, to everybody else tuned in. Interesting presentation. I believe in Parliament we've been privy to, presentations before. And I have a couple of questions, not too many. Of course, in Sint Maarten, it's always been an opinion as to what is the best solution for Sint Maarten as an island. We speak about renewable energy a lot, solar energy, wind energy, hydrogen, biomass energy, burning waste, etc. And I know that LNG itself is not a renewable energy, but of course, some type of renewable energy can be integrated into it, kind of making it into bio-LNG, etc. Right. My question would be, have there studies been done by yourself or the company in regards to what is the best feasible solution for Sint Maarten as the small island that we are? So, of course, I understand that when you do these studies, there can't be only one solution, but given, all of the factors that we have in Sint Maarten, our current crisis, the weather, weighing off all of the pros and the cons. Have there been studies that kind of conclude that this is the best solution for St. Maarten? And I'm not only looking at energy-wise, but also cost-wise, consumer-wise, etc. Secondly, in regards to our current energy crisis that we have with our utilities company, have there been conversations with them as well? You know, because of course, when we look at the current infrastructure of St. Maarten, GB kind of owns most of what to us, you know, would translate into electricity for the homes. So basically, have there been conversations with them to kind of see which solution would accommodate these difficult times that we're having into the journey that we have to embark on to actually move forward? And thirdly, have there been conversations with government on the topic? Because of course, Parliament, we can have an opinion, but as legislators, our hands are basically tied when it comes to actually executing these things. But if the executive branch is on our side and, you know, being a shareholder of GB, that might also be working the benefit of actually improving the company. Those would be my first initial questions for now, Mr. Chairman, and I'll wait the answers.
Okay.
Thank you, MP Peterson. As stated earlier, the first set of questions, the first moment of questions, we do 2-3 questions per MP, and Mr. Cruz will be able to answer directly. And after that, you know, we'll just pose all questions, and Mr. Cruz will be able to answer all at the same time. So, Mr. Cruz, if you'll be
Yes.
so kind to answer the questions from the good MP.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. In terms of the solution, the ideal solution, in our experience, a diversified energy matrix is the approach. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, it's not that this is good and the other one is bad. It is the application, the technical application that drives the solution. So how much of thermal power do I need? How much of renewables can I get? Do I have enough land to put solar panels, for example? Do I have the wind to bring wind energy? Those elements have been considered for us, and not only for St. Maarten, but for the industry. There are some islands that have, for example, geothermal capacity. So for sure, I mean, let's integrate it into. I mean, everything contributes. The key factor, in my opinion, is efficiency. And of course, efficiency can be defined, you know, for some in different terms, but at the end of the day, the challenge of efficiency is that it requires a higher upfront cost. So if the vision is a long-term vision, rest assured that the life cycle cost of the solution is going to be better for the participants. And I understand sometimes we are cash constrained, and it's not that we don't want the best solution, it's just that we cannot afford. Yeah, our approach and my professional approach to technical solutions has always been, I want to tell you what's best in our opinion. I've worked for engineering firms, I work for manufacturers, and in all my approaches has been, this is the best solution. I don't want to give you what I think you can afford. I want to give you the best, and then you tell me if you can afford, and then that's the conversation. And you know, more than not, it has been a successful kind of completion of a project because everybody chipped in, everybody put their 10 cents worth of vision, of resources, and the conversation was very rich. And also the solution has to be a continued conversation with all the members of the establishment, the utility, the water authority, the port. I did not mention the water, but it's also a very important factor. How much energy does the water treatment plant consume? So, okay, so that's, I hope I addressed, part of the question. Now, conversations with GBE. I have to say yes, we have established communication. We have not gotten into the details. I mean, we got, the group, the team got feedback. We recently had conversation with the new leadership of GBE. Yes, I mean, and I have to say that I'm happy to report that I feel that the reception to the solution, to the addressing the challenge is there. There's good reception, okay? Again, we need to work together with them and enable the conversation to find the right diversified approach to the energy matrix of the country. And government, I have to say that I have not had feedback or approach from the government. It is very important. I mean, it needs to be validated. We're not asking much for the government, if I tell you. I mean, we're not asking for the government to go into the treasury and provide funds for the project. I think that the industry is mature enough in that regard. Capital is available, technology is available, private participants or public corporations are willing to participate. At the end of the day, a project of this nature, or most natures, has to be bankable. You have to be able to pay, the bank or the investors their return. And that's when, again, a transparent and open conversation has to happen, okay? And oh, by the way, we're not saying we want to do it all. I mean, we want to do it, give me the contract. No, we want to create the environment where you invite others. I mean, it has to be transparent, okay? It cannot be just Crowley telling you what to do or getting, I'm telling you, in other countries I've seen, all of a sudden there's a player in town, they're bringing the gas and everybody's going like, what happened here, right? I mean, it creates this perception, maybe incorrect, but at the same time, it creates a perception that somebody's taking advantage of somebody. We don't want to do that. If we get here is because it makes sense for everybody, okay? Thankfully, we have a business, we can afford to do that, so my approach, respectfully to everybody, is let's do it transparently. Let's just do it that way. I mean, if it takes time, but let's do it the right way.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I see that MP La Cruz is the next speaker. MP La Cruz, you have the floor.
A blessed morning once again, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the word. SG, Mr. Cruz for the presentation. My fellow colleagues, those in the Tribune. Mr. Chairman, this has been something that I have championed, and I'll explain in few words why. While being in the ministry in TIAT, the minister, myself, a representative from the harbor at the time, visited, upon the invitation of the company, Mr. Cruz, the facility itself. We then also got the opportunity to tour a medical facility that was 100% powered by LNG generators. While these generators were running, you could literally stand next to it and have a conversation because of how quiet the generators were. During my campaign period in GB, walking around in GB, for 2-3 days after, I still would hear zzz in my ear. And we all know that, the smell, the fumes. So being at this facility was somewhat of an eye-opener. Also, Mr. Cruz mentioned dumps catching fires. We also went to a facility that collected the LNG from the methane from the dump and cleaned it, 4 generators to burn for the public. So these were things that caught my attention. A little further, in the time that I was in the Ministry of TIAT, every conference that we visited, one of the main topics were, or 2 of the topics were always, 1, the move from the cruise industry from diesel to LNG ships, and what it would mean for the economy of Sint Maarten if we would be able to facilitate the cruise ships with electricity, so power them when they come here to Sint Maarten. I have, in the meantime, taken many pictures while driving on DV Little Bay, watching the ships and the black smoke burning on our shores. But I started to ask myself, what would this actually mean financially for the country? What would this mean if a cruise ship could come on Sint Maarten, plug in, and have to pay our country for that energy? It would mean that the cruise ship could actually save its own fuel. It could refuel also, but most important, it would literally bring a new source of revenue to our country, one that is in dire need. So these were the things that actually made me push even more when I saw these things happening. And then on a trip to Parlatino, we literally heard from one of the members of Parliament of Aruba that Aruba now is building in San Nicolas an LNG transshipment port that is backed by a cruise line that the energy company, WEP, in Aruba is going 100% LNG. So then my question has always been, what are we waiting on? What are we waiting on? What is the reason that we have to tra-la-la behind? I got a call, when my article came out, I got a call from St. Kitts asking me for the contact of Crowley for them to see if they could put a company, a transshipment port. Do you know how much we would lose then? These were the reasons, and Mr. Cruz made it abundantly clear. At no point I am a proponent of a specific company doing anything on Sint Maarten. I've always believed that competition is good. If Crowley or Shell or any other company can give us a better solution or the best price, then let that company be the one to do it. But in the meantime, who we have before us that is been pushing for the last 10 years to get the attention of government and parliament after numerous motions have passed in parliament is Crowley. So that is why Crowley is here today. One of the things I missed and not so much missed, but one of the things I'd like Mr. Cruz to make a little clearer. We live in a hurricane belt. What would this mean with, for example, a facility, an LNG facility, transshipment port, supplying energy to our country? How do I see that when a hurricane comes? What would be the challenges there? And do you have any experience with that? Then I also know, for example, in the Netherlands, your electricity bill is based on your consumption or the idea of your consumption per household. So, for example, if I have a fridge that burns X amount, a washing machine that burns this amount, they make a simple calculation and they say every month, this is your price. It doesn't matter if you do less or more, this is your price per month. At the end of the year, your price is then evaluated and see if you owe them, if they owe you, and it's reestablished. Why I make mention of this? It gives me, for example, as an individual, it gives me the possibility to plan. I can now say at the end of the month, this is my GB bill. I can now plan a vacation and not wonder what my bill is going to be like at the end of the month. Because this month is 1,000, next month is 1,500, the next month is 1,300, so that becomes difficult. The question to Mr. Cruz is, would a system like that be possible? And the reason for that is when the LNG is provided, will the prices fluctuate? Or do we get a structured price or an agreement for one price that we could bank on as a country, as an individual? Then I think I saw it in the presentation, the possibility to fuel cruise ships is possible. Have you ever made a calculation of, for example, what it would mean to fuel a ship like Icon of the Seas? And just collecting 5% on the price of the fuel that the country would collect in TOTs? That is my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you. So, thank you, Mr. Lacrosse. Yeah, well, let me start with the third one. That one has the simplest answer. We don't really calculate that. And we know about the volumes, of course, that the cruise ships take. And of course, it's a simple calculation, how much, cubic meters and how much is the cubic meter or the million BTU. So, I mean, it is a simple, but it is a revenue stream, that's for sure. Okay. Now, in average, we understand that in call ports, as opposed to home ports, a cruise liner should be taking between 1,500 and 2,000 cubic meters, per fuel request. So that's to top up the fuel tanks. So, you can make a calculation independently, how many ships come over here, how many ships there are, and then you would get, if you said a percentage of it, then that's what the revenue would mean for the country. Okay. Now, number one, storms. We're actually living one getting closer to us. First of all, let's just say that we have onshore storage tanks, for example. They are designed to sustain very high winds. It's not different. I mean, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, everything is designed as conventional tanks are, even though they are cryogenic. I mean, the resistance to such high winds is absolutely possible. I mean, we have seen it, you have seen it, and then if they are well built, then that means that they will sustain the winds. If we go for a floating storage solution, what we see is that the advantage of knowing that a storm is coming with days in advance is that you disconnect, you remove ties, and then you take the vessel out of the path of the storm. And then the storm passes, and then you bring and connect and do the same thing. That's one thing. Important, before you leave, you make sure that there has to be some, even if it's minimal, storage capacity to give you for basic needs to help you deal with that. In our experience, of course, as you know, it depends on the path of the storm, the length of stay of the storm, circling around. So what we have learned is that, having the ability to move out, from port or from ties or buoys, gives you the flexibility to work on that. So it shouldn't be, in my opinion, a constraint. Not sure if I answered your question, Mr. Lacrosse. Okay. Now, price fluctuations of the fuel. Indeed, what we are proponing is an index. The formula is very simple. Is the index, Henry Hub, plus a percentage which normally is associated to liquefaction. That is, wherever the gas is coming from, you have that term. And the index varies according to global supply, to the number of consumers who take that kind of particular commodity from the region where they take it. So it could be Henry Hub. There are other indices like TTF, JKM. But on this part of the world, we're starting to see the prevalence of Henry Hub, which is in Louisiana. Now, to that you add the cost of your terminal. That is a fixed cost. That could be very well the part where you can completely forecast what the cost of it is going to be. Whether it is the amortization, whether it is all your operational expenses, everything, that part of the terminal can for sure be understood. And then there's the transportation component of the molecule. And again, depending on the volume and the distance that we use to bring the molecule here, then that's going to be the fluctuation in the price. Depending on volumes, shipping rates, there could be some fluctuation. There are long-term contracts for chartering vessels to move the gas. There are spot prices. So again, it depends on how we structure the whole business model that will give us certainty. Certainty of you said it correctly, I cannot even plan a vacation because I don't know if I'm going to be available to pay for my electricity bill, much less for a vacation. So yes, there are some elements, and particularly with all the tools that we have at hand, artificial intelligence. I mean, where I live, I get a forecast of how much I will be paying at the end of the month, depending. And again, it has all elements like you do. Here, it's a fuel surcharge, capacity charge, tax for this, tax for that, tax for that. And then I get a projection that, maybe 5 days into the month, it says, well, based on the consumption that you have had, your projection is going to be this by the end of the month. So I can plan ahead, and it is very valuable for a family, at least to know what's coming at the end of the month when I have to pay the bill, right? So that is certainly possible. I mean, the tools, the software, AI is helping us to do that. So in my opinion, that should not be a big concern. It can be implemented in what I refer to as the efficiency of the solution. What do we want to address, and how do we mix it into the overall life cycle cost of the solution?
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I see that MP Myers is the next MP to speak.
Good morning to my colleagues and to you in particular, Mr. Cruz. I must say, Mr. Cruz, your presentation was very extensive and informative, because a lot of the questions that I was writing during your presentation, as the presentation went on, you answered them. So I had quite a few questions, but you've left me with only 3 because you've answered them along the way. And I think one of the concerns that we have, or me in particular, is because we don't know enough. Mm-hmm. I believe information is key, and based on your presentation, I have a comfort level with it now. MP La Cruz, my colleague, has always been a proponent of LNG, and one of my main concerns were what would the overall costs be. But you explained that initially what the cost, it's heavy on the top end, but as time goes along, because of the low price of the fuel, that it will work out, especially for a small scale. And then I wanted to know exactly, because Sint Maarten is a small island, and I wanted to know, of course, how would that impact Sint Maarten? How do we order, for example, if GB was to order, is it a certain amount? But then you explain that there are smaller capacities that they can order. Costs, in your assessment, what do you think the initial cost would be for a small island like Sint Maarten or GB? What the initial cost will be, in your opinion?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayer. Right?
Myers, yes.
Myers, okay, yeah, thank you for your question. Okay, it depends. I'm sorry for that answer, but it really depends on several factors. I mean, I'm not saying that it cannot be less expensive than fuel by fuel. When you compare fuel by fuel, I can tell you with a certain degree of confidence that in the majority of the cases, depending on the fuel type, and I'm gonna refer specifically to liquid fuel being diesel. Normally, what I see in the region, what I see in other countries, is that delivered price of LNG is lower than diesel. Now, there is the other type of fuels for example, heavy fuel oil. So normally in my experience, the cost of LNG is higher than heavy fuel oil. And I refer a little bit about the value comment that I made because, of course, you know, if you're burning a fuel that is cheaper, why would you want to burn another one? Then there's the question, do I want to continue to, is it in my best interest to continue to incur in that cost of fuel? I mean, that's where I see that in some communities where I have been told that we're burning a lower price cost fuel, a year, 2 years down the road, I pick up the phone and they ask me, Mr. Cruz, now we have to change to another fuel. We're being told that we know more. My customers don't want to buy from me because I'm burning this kind of fuel. So again, that's the value part of the answer. And again, value is what it is. We say it is, right? I mean, in reality, that's what matters for us. Cost is cost. I mean, you cannot do much with it, but value is important. So understanding better the mix of fuel that GEV, for example, has, you know, in how they burn, what they're using, would give us a better idea of what is the projection of the cost that you want, the cost savings. You know, where would you be? And again, as I said, efficiency is important, but you have to create a system that is, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but it is tailor-made to the problem you want, the technical problem you want to solve. I can tell you that in the maritime industry, in our vessels, LNG vessels, we designed the storage tank from zero. We don't go and buy from the shelf a tank, even though it could sound that it is more reasonable or affordable. The design of that tank has been maybe general, but has been in general terms. We want to focus on the energy dynamics of that particular application. And that's the level of detail that I would expect that is requested from anybody who comes here and says, well, I'm going to give you half the price. Well, yeah, but you know, under what conditions?
I know, but maybe I didn't explain what I want to know. For example, if GB decides to do this, in your opinion, what would be the initial cost, the startup cost to convert from heavy fuel to LNG? For example, in 2012, GB spent 264 million guilders on heavy fuel in 2012, which represents 18% of our GDP. Of course, that puts strain on your overall economy. And we understand, because if you're starting from zero, which GB would be, what would the overall investment be initially? And then how long, which would have been my second question, how long would it take for them to show a profit? In typical business terms, that term is about 5 years, a 5-year projection. So in that 5-year projection, what the return on investment would be for GB, in your assessment, based on anywhere between 55 and 60 megawatts that they produce.
Okay.
Anywhere between 55 and 70, sorry.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for your question. Sorry for not being that specific on my answer, on my previous answer. And again, I don't know if at this stage we can give you a final answer on the cost. But what I can tell you is that there are different ways of doing it. For example, I have customers that they don't have the cash flow to invest in a storage and regasification. So what the industry does is that they provide the infrastructure at a monthly cost. It's just like going to the bank and getting a loan, with the possibility of transferring the assets at a defined point in time throughout the life cycle of the asset. that's one way of addressing. So it doesn't really have to be a full front investment. It can be a service that you get out of it. And of course, there are accounting principles, there are financial principles, there are regulations with that. So that's what I said at the beginning. This is a simple conversation that has very complex implications. So I'm sorry that I can give you a straight answer, 2 years, 1 year, 10 million, 20 million. We have to sit down and with the incumbent party, GEB in this case, move to the next step and say, okay, tell me, open up. And we sign all sorts of documents. I mean, that's the way we do it with all of our customers. I mean, we sit down, we look at, and then we brainstorm on what is, like I said, diversify the energy matrix. You don't have to have everything of LNG. I can tell you, right there, you can find some efficiencies. So it's a matter of creating that conversation, Mr. Myers. I cannot give you one straight answer. I wish I could at this point in time. I hope I can come back and tell you, now we have had this conversation, and this is it, because this is the vision that has been chosen. So it's a teamwork at the end of the day. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request that we get the opportunity somehow to have that next steps, so I can come back and answer that question to you, Mr. Mayor, like, this is going to cost us, and the return on investment is this, or it's going to be as this. I mean, this is what we have decided. And maybe I can have GEBE sitting by the side and say, yeah, we thought about it. Yeah, and this is what we think is best for the community.
So, in
That-
essence, what you are telling me, and again.
1 minute, Mr. MP Myers, your mic is off.
Yeah.
And I'm just being devil's advocate at this point.
Agree. No.
So you're telling me that here is a possible proposal, you've met with GB, you've met with the harbor, but you do not have any financial projections?
We have general projections in the industry, Mr. Mayers. It is the state of where we are.
Okay.
And again, it is a step in the right direction. This conversation is a step in the right direction. But I cannot promise something at this point in time or give you a specific number at this time. I wish I could.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I would just like to remind the good MPs and Mr. Cruz that we always speak through the chair. Besides that, I would like to move on to the following MP. MP La Vega, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for your elaborate presentation. I do recall some of it from when the team presented in 2021 to the board of GB. I have 3 questions. Have you spoken with the harbor recently? I know you said you reached out to NVGEBE, but I want to know, have you revisited conversation and dialogue with the harbor? Because it was stated that it would have to be a joint venture. Everybody would have to be on the same page, electric company as well as the port, for it to be feasible. My second question, it was stated in some articles after the last presentation to Parliament 2021 that the company would give electricity at 17.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which at the time would have saved, which would have been a 33% savings. Obviously the electricity has changed drastically in 4 years, but has the percentage remained the same, to your knowledge, in terms of around that 30% savings, if the country had to go to LNG? And lastly, I know the stance of Crowley at the time was to have a PPA, a power purchase agreement. This basically is saying that Crowley would now have the concession to provide electricity to St. Maarten for X amount of years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Mr. La Vega, thank you. Thank you for your question. So let me start with the last one, because that's the one that I did not write. Yeah, a PPA means a power purchase agreement. I produce the power and I sell it. There are some countries where the regulation doesn't allow me to sell it to the public, so it has to be sold to the national utility. And the utility, again, does, it's just, I become a contractor of the national utility. In other countries, the independent power producer, they just establish a utility, and then there's an option for electrical service, either the same region or a new region that is being served. So in this case, that's the way a PPA would work. Again, it doesn't have to be Crowley that takes the whole PPA, but I mean, we could. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, we would like to entertain the idea, as we said last time. In terms of the savings, second question, I have to say that the proportion is about the same. I mean, we all have suffered the inflation, so, you know, but the proportion is about the same. I mean, it moves with inflation. I have to say that the cost of the LNG itself has gone down. From what I said at the beginning, there is a lot. During the pandemic, and that is right after the pandemic is when we met, is there were obviously a lot of export terminal projects around the world that were put on hold. That created an imbalance in the supply and demand structure or map of LNG. However, we now are, I can say that the industry has come back to a point where new projects are reaching FID, financial investment decisions, so it's a go, start building, prepare. They have the off-takers, the aggregators, the traders, I mean, the big volumes around the world. So those projects are huge. I mean, they could, one of those projects could power, I don't know how many islands in the Caribbean at once, right? So the supply of LNG is coming better. So that, just because of supply and demand, that is going to help us reduce the price, which, who knows, at the end of the day, the proportion stays the same with inflation and everything, but the cost of the molecule may help us increase that percentage to a different, to a better percentage. So we are optimistic about the potential benefit of the situation that LNG as an industry is going through right now. I mean, of course, you're not in the industry, but I can tell you, every day we hear news about this plan, the Gulf of now America, even Mexico, they have reached several FIDs projects, whether it's large scale or small scale. So it is a very active moment for the LNG industry around the world. And finally, the harbor. Have I spoken to the harbor? On this visit to the island, I have requested a conversation with the general manager. But we did tour when we invited parties, like Mr. Lacrosse visited Puerto Rico to take our facilities. A representative from the Port Authority was there. And so therefore, there has been this approach to the port. Now, I want to clarify that it's not really, it would be ideal to be part of the process. Again, and that's a conversation that we need to have. Doesn't mean that we cannot provide power to the utility if we don't have the port. I mean, it's the ideal scenario that we go from utility to bunkering, as I showed in the chart. So my intention, I hope, and this is something that I've done throughout my career. I know people are busy, but I can go knock on the door and talk to the authority during this visit and say, hey, just want to touch base. This is what we're doing. What do you think? I'm also happy to report that we are also part of the PMAC, Ports Management Association of the Caribbean. And our last meeting was, our general annual meeting was in Curacao back in, I think it was May, June. Well, the Port Authority was present over there, and I was part of a panel. So maybe directly or indirectly, the comments, the approach to LNG has been communicated recently also. And again, if you think it's a good idea, if you think that there's reason to continue this conversation, your support in this community finds maybe it's a Sunday on the beach or maybe at church. I mean, hey, did you talk to the Crowley guy? I mean, it happens, and your involvement, if you agree with it, is of particular importance in this whole process.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Given the time Mr. Cruz, would it be possible to, and the amount of people that still have questions, would it be possible to give short, concise answers? Because afterwards, we will still have a clarification moment where you may be able to elaborate on the things you didn't get to touch on.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker will be MP Lewis. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Good morning, or rather good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Cruz. I just had 4 questions. However, basically all 3 MP Myers elaborated on. I would like to know, what would this do not only for Sint Maarten, but for the general population when it comes to job creation? I know you mentioned basically, because we were going to ask you technical questions where you cannot provide the percentage of the worth of the project, etc. But would this allow Sint Maarten people to get work through your organization? That's it, Chair. Thank you.
I'm going to be short on my answer. Yes. Nah, just kidding. No, yes, indeed. I mean, engineering work, for example, well, there are many specialized cryogenics, for example. It's a complex topic, but CHP, engineering, I mean, it doesn't, and it doesn't have to be through Crowley. It could be a local company who develops the engineering skills, the labor skills, the maintenance skills. So yes, I mean, it will create jobs specific to this technology, if you will. So we are very positive. We are seeing it in other parts of the world. I mean, the community can be trained outside, but it can be trained inside. And part of the benefit that we like to bring to the communities is that, okay, we can be part of that training or certification process. You know, we train our truck drivers, the ones that deliver to our facilities. We train them so they get this specific training, so they are more valuable to their employers. So they are now knowledgeable on how to handle the loading and offloading of the gas into the facility. And again, like I said, there are engineering jobs, construction, civil engineering. So lots of disciplines will get the benefit of this economy. Was I short enough?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Next MP on the speakers list will be the good MP Veronica Jansen Webster.
Thank
Jansen
you.
Webster, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to Mr. Cruz. My main question is about how the fuel will actually be delivered. So what is the proposal? Because I've seen the ship that you're talking about that for the future, but I've also seen the ship with the bullets.
Yep.
Containers. Are you looking now at delivering via the bullet containers? And are you looking at docking then at the cargo harbor versus in the past with GEBE having a terminal, which a terminal would then have to be built? My questions surround the infrastructure that will be needed. So I understand then a regasification plant will have to be built as well, fuel storage as well. So I'm looking at what kind of a footprint, so the area space that would be needed for, let's say, to start a 10 to a 30 megawatt production area. What size would be needed for regasification plant? And because, as some people might know, I've worked in GB, I've been the COO. I spoke to Crowley when I was there. So this is a refresher. And a lot has changed. I know that back then, what was the issue was the shipping costs. Because you mentioned now as well that the LNG cost has actually gone down, in which we were expecting that it would go down. You have mentioned also that LNG is usually cheaper than diesel, but it could be more than HFO. That's correct. I think that's what you said.
Yes, that's what I said.
And right now, the issue that we do have is because we have all of these smaller units because of our issues that we had in June with the energy crisis with engines catching fire, we're using a lot of diesel now. So I can see where LNG, we're going to save, let's say, in production. However, the shipping cost has always been an issue. So if you can tell me, like you indicated now, the ships can come from Puerto Rico, etc. But do you see that the shipping costs have decreased in the past 5 to 7 years? Or will the shipping costs still be maybe relatively more than the cost of the LNG, or factor in more? You know, because of course we would be looking at what is more economical for us if you're switching. When you look at environmentally, etc., and a study has been done. I heard my colleague MP asking if a study was done. I know that the company did a study in 2015. So before I was even in the company, in 2015, in November actually, a study has already been done in the fuel mix and what would be better for NVGB. And LNG did come out really well in there environmentally, and some other aspects also. Something that I don't think you mentioned, maintenance of the engines with LNG, because it's a cleaner fuel. We have less maintenance. I think maintenance
Correct.
was down by 30% or something as well.
Correct.
Compared to heavy fuel oil and diesel. So there are so many reasons why LNG compare well or better than the heavy fuel oil that's being used now and light fuel oil. However, I remember distinctly the shipping being the issue, and how many of those bullet tanks would GEB use if they're only starting with 10 to 30 megawatt? How many, you know? Because that will determine how many times the ships have to come.
Correct.
And the storage, etc., because right now there's no storage for that. So these are all considerations, and I do think, I thank you very much for your presentation. It was very clear, and I do think, and I've always championed this. I've been to conferences in 2011 when it was starting out. I think there was a barge in Martinique. Mm-hmm. I've been to Houston when Wärtsilä started looking into LNG also. So we know about this. We've been looking into it, and it's a matter, I think, of getting everyone around the table, not only the power plant, but we have the large hotels.
Correct.
And we have also a large industrial laundry close to the power plant. Those are industries that would be able to use the CHP, for instance. So, correct. And like you said, volume is important. So if we get the large industries, the large hotels, the power plant, and can also supply ships, I think that we will have a volume that will be, we will be able to carry down the price as well of the shipping, and then also tying in with our neighboring islands. If we have the neighboring islands interested, we can share the cost in shipping. So I see how it can work, but it's a matter of getting everyone to sit down and understand the product and understand, let's say, the viability. Let me just look at some other questions. Yeah, I think I covered everything. I mean, I've seen the plant in Quisqueya in the Dominican Republic. Mm-hmm. They have the same identical engine that GB has, engine 20. They have the same one, and I was able to see the bullet tanks coming there from the port to the Quisqueya plant, and so you know we know that it is possible.
It is viable.
Yes. So I just want to thank you for your presentation, but if you could just explain how you see the logistics and how you see that the arrival of the fuel for now.
Very well.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. Thank you, Ms. Webster. Okay. It's not such a short answer, but let me get started by perhaps putting into consideration these units that are burning diesel are of temporary nature, right? So the first question that I would ask is, how longer are you planning to have those units working for you? That's the first question that I would say. Now, but let's assume that they're going to stay for 2 to 3 years more, okay, depending. Okay, what happens there is that on a short-term basis, because we would consider that short-term basis, the appropriate solution, in my opinion, for that kind of size of capacity would be to bring the bullets or the ISO tanks, the containers, with the vessel, and we could do it from Puerto Rico. And as a matter of fact, the only constraint here would be having the fleet of containers available to put on the vessel. So that would be a short-term solution to a problem. And yes, the delivered cost of the LNG, in my opinion, would be very reasonable compared to the diesel fuel being burned. There is, though, the consideration of the containers availability and cost. I have customers that they tell me, Arturo, I don't want you to own the bullets, I want to own the bullets. So they go to the bank, they get a loan, and 6 months down the road, they own. So they bring me their tanks, and then I fill for them. That's one way of doing it that reduces your CapEx of the infrastructure required. Yeah, the other way is just lease them for the period of 2 to 3 years, and there's a cost associated to it. So shipping, yes. It's not easy to say that shipping costs are going to go down, particularly on this industry. My recommendation whatsoever is that for this particular application, it's very difficult to have a liner service to deal with the fuel needs of the application, GEB in particular in this case. It requires a dedicated vessel, and you saw it in the picture that I showed. We have a vessel with the ISO tanks, nice picture there. We can reduce the cost of transportation by loading it to the max. In other words, dollars of round trip divided by the amount of energy carried, that gives you the cost of transportation in units of energy. So if at port we have cranes, for example, that helps because we can double the size of the vessel just by stacking them one on top of the other. If we don't have cranes, then that means that we have to roll them. So they have to come in a chassis, and then we can roll them. So again, I can't remember if we have cranes here at the port, but let's say that if we do, then we can, the vessel that you saw were on chassis, so we cannot stack them, and there were 20 of them. We could put, I have spoken to the owner of the vessel here, and he says that we can put 30 to 45 tanks on that vessel. So that reduces your cost of transportation at the end of the day. That's a way of optimizing your transportation cost. And that can be done relatively soon. That could be a short-term solution to a long-term problem, if you will, Ms. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. And I'll give the floor to MP Roseberg. MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Blessed afternoon, Secretary General, also to our visitor, Mr. Cruz, and to my dear colleagues and the one in the public tribune. First of all, thank you for this presentation. I'm officially not part of the Cvromi committee, but seeing that I have been hearing so much about LNG and I wasn't aware and I didn't really deep dive into the topic, I found it necessary to be present and to educate myself on that topic. So thank you for that. The presentation was indeed very interesting. I do have a few questions. My colleague, MP Lewis, asked one of my questions already in regards to the job creation. What I would like to add to that question, if it reaches to that, to also look into maybe collaborating with the vocational schools so that also those students can learn the trade in that sense. Other than that, I took from your presentation in regards to the cost and risk, I have a question in regards to the supply, like if LNG, the supply, if the contracts can be flexible based on, for example, the tourism cycles. I don't know if that question was asked already. And also, in regards to the global demand, what happens to the LNG pricing if the global demand spikes? Other than that, safety concerns, how will it be ensured and promised that the environment basically, that it will not cause any new risk? For example, has it been looked into what kind of emergency response systems could be, for example, placed at the port, or will those conversations be had once you meet with the port? And also in regards to training, community safety zones training, what training will be required in that sense? And the most important question basically is, seeing that based on the research that I have done in the short time and also preparing for this meeting, I have been reading about LNG, and I've been seeing in the short term that I have been in Parliament that in the past several motions have been passed, and we're currently still here. So my question is, like, where, through you, Mr. Chair, where are we currently stuck? What is currently needed to get it going, and what is currently the plan to move forward, the clear timeline? Because yes, it's for me pretty much shocking to see that there have been several articles, several meetings, like where is it going wrong, and what is needed. That's it for now. Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Roseberg. I'm going to try to address the question. Tourism cycle as it relates to the term of the contract. It is possible, yes, indeed. One of the elements of the pricing or understanding the supply cycle is precisely how, what is your daily volume, and there are cycles, and therefore, if they can be accounted for upfront, there is no risk of going without or not having enough. As long as we have that understanding of what the cycles, and within the cycle there is a bandwidth, so you can move within that cycle, as the tourist industry flows. So that would be my comment towards tourism cycles, which are of extreme importance. I agree with you. In terms of pricing or global demand, because the molecule is traded based on indices, then they are tied to, indices are of global concern. So if there is a high demand on Asia, maybe, then the price is gonna go up. If it's low, supply and demand, in other words. However, if it happens to LNG, rest assured it will happen to oil, and it will happen to other molecules. So it's not that this one behaves one way and the others don't. Price of oil is going to fluctuate. Price of LPG is going to fluctuate again according to regional or global supply and demand forces. What I can tell you, though, as I said in the beginning, is that Henry Hub historically, this index that we use, has shown, and if you look it up, you can see, throughout time, how other indices fluctuate, and Henry Hub projects a more stable curve. In other words, less fluctuation, which is good because then you can have a bit more certainty in terms of what the price fluctuation is going to be. But yeah, global supply and demand, and we are attached to it. There are some financial instruments in the marketplace. You hedge your fuel supply. What I have learned is that for small amounts of LNG, it's more costly to hedge in the financial markets than to absorb a price increase. And of course, the benefit is that if there is a reduction, you didn't have to pay a trader or a financial institution for that protection. So that's what I have learned. I've tried to do hedging, offer hedging for these small amounts, and it hasn't turned positive numbers in my experience, at least. Let me just see here. Plan to move forward. Very good question. And I asked the same question. However, I have said, as I said, we started the conversation recently with GEPE. They seem I'm not sure if the real term is the new administration, but they seem really open to learn more about this, to open our doors. As a matter of fact, I'm going to stop by tomorrow, to talk more, to look about infrastructure, what they have. And if I may address just real quick, the infrastructure required, yes, we have to take a look at it. You've seen the vessel that delivers the diesel or the LPG. I mean, we're talking, in your minds, you can visualize something very similar. And storage tanks on site, same thing. So that's about the next steps that we need to go with GEB. Okay, but again, I think if these conversations that we have had are of value, are that remove the roadblocks, promote the conversation, promote the next step. Okay. Did I answer? Did I miss one question? We're good?
No, you didn't, but it's more for me to understand, like, why are we still here? Like, where it went wrong, to know, to avoid that from happening, to go into the future with a strong vision, because I personally cannot understand that years later, if it was already a conversation back then, that we're still here. So that's why I'm trying to understand what is needed to make sure that those roadblocks are not there anymore.
Okay.
So that was more my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz and MP Roseberg. I don't see any other speakers on the speakers list. I see that MP La Cruz would like to have the floor. MP La Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Cruz, what you're actually proposing to Sint Maarten, is this the same thing that exists now in Bonaire? That a company outside gives the electricity to the local company and the company then distributes to the rest of the island? Is that exactly the model? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. It could be, again, we're not set on the final solution. It could be. I mean, there are, as I said, there's capital available, there are parties interested, so it could be one of the ways of doing it. So we need to understand first the technical solution, because the technical solution is going to drive the commercial implications. And then that's how we get to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Seeing the speakers list, I'll just take the opportunity to ask my questions.
Yes, sir.
I had a series of questions, but MP Myers literally took the words out of my mouth, so which left only one,
Yes, sir.
Being that you spoke about volume versus cost, right?
Yes.
And then also you mentioned value versus space and cost, right? Given the fact that I assume that Sint Maarten has, you guys have looked at the Sint Maarten and what it can offer, the opportunities on Sint Maarten as pertains to LNG. What would be the baseline volume that minimally needed in order to make it interesting, LNG interesting for Sint Maarten, given the space available as well? So maybe that's a bit too technical. I've tried to leave the cost out of it, but what would be the number of volume that would actually make the LNG transition at Sint Maarten actually make sense from the minimal number?
Okay. At the utility scale, I would say from 10 to 30 megawatts at the utility scale. That's how you get started, and that's how you can still consider one technology versus the other, like the ISO tanks versus the small LNG carrier. When you go beyond, your logistics start to get complicated. In terms of tanks on the road and, in one point, the ship and by the utility. So, and also with the infrastructure required. So what we have learned is that from 10 to 30 megawatts is kind of like the threshold to transition from ISO tanks to small LNG carriers type of solution.
And the 10 to 30, do you have an idea? Because I know you mentioned that there are different options as it pertains to installations as regards to infrastructure, right? But going off of a minimally needed infrastructure for that amount of volume, what kind of space would be required for that? If you look at square meters or whatever, what kind of space are we looking at? Averagely, just a ballpark figure.
I don't have the right footprint.
Right.
We can use vertical tanks for example, instead of horizontal, so that reduces the space. I wish I can show you a picture of a facility that has like 6 megawatts. That is actually, Mr. Lacrosse, you visited one of those facilities, and it was a really small footprint that we required. So it was a small footprint. I cannot give you the area, the square meters or square feet right now, but it was small. I would say, I'm going to say a little bit larger than this room, Mr. Lacrosse. I mean, something like vertical tanks, for 3 to 6 megawatts. So we're talking in that vicinity. Of course, if you put the horizontal bullets and you make more, you need more real estate. Okay, that's one thing. The other part of the solution that I mentioned is distributed power. I have there are solutions that you don't have enough real estate and you don't want to demolish the plant or the warehouse that you have over there. GEB, they're not going to just get rid of it, of what they have. They may use it in the future. So you go to the nearest substation, electrical substation, and you connect there. And of course, depending on the evacuation capacity of the substation, then that's the amount of power that you install. And then that drives you. Maybe that substation is out in the field. Now you can put a less expensive horizontal tank instead of a vertical tank. So those are the approaches to that to the same problem, depending on the real estate and availability. But in general, the logistics of more than 30 megawatts of ISO tanks on the road, it complicates it. And then there's the tourist industry. There are some islands where tourists come and to go to the power plant is just one street, and you don't want to see a lot of ISO tanks on the road because it's a fuel, it's a hazardous material. So you want to deal with those dynamics up front. If there are some roads, maybe even the construction of a temporary road to go around. That needs to be decided. But as I was saying to Ms. Webster, if you want to right now take the opportunity to reduce the cost of fuel for the diesel engines that you are temporary under a contract, then that could be one way of doing it. So that's a short answer to a long detailed answer, engineering question.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I now look at the members if there are any points of clarification. I see there are no points of clarification. And as promised, Mr. Cruz, are there any points that you wish to clarify, having answered all the questions up to this point?
I'd like to get back to my initial statement. First of all, thank you. And second of all, we don't want to demonize any other technical solution, any other fuel. All of them have their purpose, and all of them have been adopted by some and not by others. We think that the community that we do business with is convinced of the value, of the potential, and it is aligned with the vision of its constituents. So again, thank you for the opportunity to present and to discuss and create the space of our next conversation.
With that being said, Mr. Cruz, I would like to thank you again as well for the extensive presentation. At some points it got real technical, and I wish I paid more attention back in chemistry. Okay. But it was very, very in-depth, and I think it gave a good idea to what LNG and also Crowley has to offer to the island of Sint Maarten. I think the logical question, I heard it posed a couple of times, what now? Given that this is the Committee of Spatial Planning and Infrastructure, for short, Cvromi, we are not the in the execution branch. So that would be the council of ministers and the ministers relative to the ministries that's over GEBE. But I think there are a couple technical questions that, of course, because of the setting, you weren't able to give answers to. For example, the questions from MP Myers as it pertains to cost, etc.
Yeah.
So I think the logical step forward is the committee comprise a letter towards your person with further questions, in which you'll be able to elaborate on in length, and in response to that, we will then take it up with the Council of Ministers to ask them what their plans are, given the knowledge we've garnered from you today and in the subsequent letter following this meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you just said it right. I mean, that would be a great next step to have your participation in terms of carrying this, this message to the appropriate government party or part.
Yes, so with that being said, I would like to thank Crowley and yourself being a representative here today for your time and the knowledge that you shared with us and taking the time out to answer all our questions. I would like to thank for your participation in that, and I hereby close this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much.